What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making Coast to Coast your first listen for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on Spotify, you're on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you leave that 5-star review. You're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you guys think. You do that, we'll keep producing that content. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the most intriguing teams ahead of the new season. There's been a lot of change without any major change in the NBA this offseason, so we're gonna have a little bit of fun here. Before we get into it though, Chris, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm good. I'm recovering from a 3-day move. I'm still not even moved yet. If you've ever moved, like, shout out to you. You probably had to move in the last week. I mean, you moved across the pond, but I don't think you had to take a lot with you. But it's one of those times you're like, how do I have all this stuff? This is maybe this is an American thing. You just have too much stuff. I just wish I could just throw it all away and like start anew, but we're not making enough money from this podcast, I don't think, to do that yet. But it's good, man. I'm definitely still recovering, but should be good.
Yeah, all right. Well, since you're in recovery, well, let's just get right into it, and I'll just throw you straight into the deep end and let go for your first team that you think is most intriguing ahead of the new year.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Let's talk about a team that we've mentioned a few times, but a player that we need to talk about a little more is Zion Williamson and the New Orleans Pelicans. And let's talk about why they're interesting, why they're fascinating, why we need to be talking about them more, even though it's September. And let's start off with the picture that went viral, and anything's going viral right now. Like even even LaMelo Ball posting a picture about like his Mario boots is going viral. So maybe it's worth nothing, but for any player in the league that you see a picture of, oh, look how jacked he looks. First of all, you got to make sure is that AI. Now we got all these AI generated photos, like, but for Zion Williamson, he's the one player that when you talk about what his body looks like in the off season, that really matters. Dude, this guy is he's under his Duke weight now. Like he's even lighter than he was at Duke. And our big question about him has always been health, has always been how is he going to keep the weight off? Can he go a full season? Then we see his flash, his 40-point game, looking like he's about to have a dominant playoff run. Then he goes out. And I think that was like his moment where he's like, all right, I need to keep the weight off. I really need to stay healthy. I need to like get to that next level. I'm knocking right there. And let's talk about the Pels, man, because I think it all starts with Zion, that he's a guy we thought he would be a top 10 player if all things went right for him. I think I'm still holding on to a little bit of that stock, Zion top 10 stock. And if he is physically ready like that, if that is how he's gonna keep working this whole season, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that he has that potential in him this season, and all the other guys too have the potential in them to continue rocking with him and to continue getting better with what Willie Green's done with that team. I think the Pelicans need to be a team that everyone pays attention next season in contention.
Yeah, I mean that's what we keep saying. They feel so close yet so far. That's been the story of the Pelicans for the last like two seasons. And like you mentioned last year with Zion, the like he that was his I'm here moment. That was like the passing of the guard almost. He was about to take out LeBron James and go into the playoffs for the first time. And of course, injuries came up yet again, which has just been the story of Zion's career, which obviously sucks. And like you said, hopefully that was his just like realization moments like, oh shit, I really got to get myself in shape now. And this isn't the year where his money's only guaranteed if he actually adheres to his diet. Isn't there was some element of his contract that he had to adhere to a certain type of diet to make his money. Maybe that's having an impact too, but he definitely looked good. I mean, just look at his face. You can just say that's as slim as I've ever seen Zion Williamson. When you see that picture, it's just you can see it in his face. It's looking extremely slim. And if that's the beginning. If that's going to lead to him being healthy, then it's absolutely great because when he's on it, he's an unbelievable player to watch. Like he's a sick athlete. He can do it all in terms of offense other than shoot, which actually doesn't really impact him as much as you'd think in this modern game. So I'm so excited to see the Pelicans. Like I had them lower on my list, but looking at that, I'm like, okay, Zion first. Then you're like, do they get a center? Can they trade Brandon Ingram? Does Trey Murphy start? there's so many questions that I can't wait to see with the New Orleans Pelicans, because if they're healthy and they can figure it out with Brandon Ingram and they can figure out a center, then you're like, they could be the team that makes the jump into the top six next year in the
Yeah,
West.
yeah. And I think the thing is, it all boils down to this. Zion Williamson is one of the only players you can really think of that next season could jump into being a top 10 player. Like it could go from being a top 20, 25-ish player to top 10 player. And when you have a guy like that on your team, and we've seen that, we've seen him have those stretches of being a 30 point per game point center, that kind of player that is creating threes for other players. He's really like the fact that you have a LeBron James level player in the open court, like when Zion catches rebound and he's going coast to coast, trademark that, like that is your LeBron level player. Like he's not going to in the half court be like LeBron, but when you have that kind of skill set, and when we've seen him do that, and if he can do that for a full season, when you have that kind of guy, everything becomes simple. That's what it becomes. If he becomes that guy, he is that guy, and if he can channel that for that this whole season, everything becomes simple. CJ has already accepted his role, and I think because he pooped his pants in the postseason this year, we forget the fact that he really embraced his role as a off guard and as a shooter, and he had his best season from three. He shot 43% for three. He's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. I don't have questions about him. Like it, I don't want him to be reliant on him to deliver in the playoffs. Honestly, like this should be Zion. Like he should. CJ needs to keep leaning into that role as a shooter. And also like questions about Ingram, there's a reason why there's no good conversation to have, because we all know that there's not a good trade. There's no good expert trades. I saw one talking about Detroit's not trading for him, guys. Like none of these trades make sense because they don't. And there's a very simple way it does is if Ingram starts taking threes. Well, guess what? When he was an all-star, took 6.2 threes. He made 39% of them. The reason why he was ascending was because he decided to stop being a guy who just played on ball all the time and shot more threes. And if things become simple with Zion, if everything's obvious, like, hey, we could be a contender if you just stick to your role. He takes less on ball responsibilities, shoots more. Like that becomes a very simple recipe, not only for Ingram to become a better teammate for this team, but also rehab his value. If another team can look at him and be like, hey, you can still be that guy, you can kind of fit next to our star, and maybe we need a little bit of that on ball from you, then that becomes a situation where maybe there's a trade on the table. So there's so many things in this scenario where Zion ascending to that level simplifies everything for everybody else in a way that's already happened for their star role players. That could happen for Ingram as well, and maybe that's a point where he's good enough where they're gonna contend with him and they keep going with it. Maybe they find someone to fill in that center role, and B, he rehabs his value enough where there is a trade to make something make more sense with this roster. But I think either way, if Zion is gonna be that healthy, if he's gonna be that agile, he's gonna be that level of athlete that we know he can be, that we've seen him be, but do it for a whole season, all this stuff becomes simple, and I think everything works out from that point.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. It's just the question is just they're going to need to get a center, because right now the Pelicans are going to struggle to get a rebound, because we know how much Zion hates to rebound. They don't have a center. Their center is currently Daniel Tice. So, I mean, that's going to be an area where I feel like they'll definitely be exposed until they find a way to pave over those cracks. I mentioned Stephen Adams before. I don't know. We obviously don't know what he's going to be like coming off that serious injury, but he feels like a guy they could potentially get maybe on the cheap. We'll have to wait and
Yeah.
see. But yeah, just figure like yeah, it's such a wait and see. But like this is the title of the show, the most intriguing, and the Pelicans are right up there. And we're talking about intriguing teams. Zion's one of the most intriguing players, and the Pelicans just as a whole, because they've been so close and they feel like they're so close to being that contender. They are definitely one of the most intriguing teams ahead of the new year.
Yeah. And in terms of the center position, and this is a super deep cut, and that's why it's intriguing. Maybe like you have all these things with the guys you know, but a couple guys we don't know. Two rookie centers on their roster, Yves Misi from Baylor, Cameroonian, and Karlo Matkovic from Bosnia Herzegovina. Shout out Nikola Vucevic. But these are two guys, 7-footers, with no competition on the team. Like Daniel Tice is going to have his role. He's going to be, I mean, he is a great backup center. And he's a guy who could also stretch the floor. Like 15 minutes of time when he's sharing the floor with Zion, he's going to provide great interior defense, and he's going to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. And he actually matches up well with Zion, but he can't, like, dude's not going to play 30 minutes a game. So you look at these two rookies and like, hey, you're two 7-footers. And one of you, Carlo, he just played in the G League for 10 games and he put up 17 points, 8 rebounds, 1.5 blocks. He actually made 33% of his threes. Dude, can you compete right now to play 15 minutes in an NBA game? Can you do that? If either of these guys do that, hey, like we've seen rookie centers make things work. We just saw Derek Lively is Derek Lively, right? But Jock Landale, for example, Jock Landale came out of nowhere and was a really, really important piece for the Phoenix Suns just a couple years ago. And, you know, you just need someone to be big. You need someone to rebound. And if you can throw in a couple other little things here, like that's helpful. But they just need bodies. If those two guys can just play some NBA minutes, maybe they have their center by committee, on this roster. Because what I would love to see is, if Zion's at the 5, yeah, you're going to sacrifice defensively. But here's another like wishful thinking. You saw a lot of weak side defense from Zion in college. And that's because he had that quickness, because he wasn't lumbering around as much. And he used his verticality, he used his quickness and his athleticism to be a good defender in that aspect. They'll never be a good on-ball defender. We know that. But as a weak side defender, maybe he can do that little bit to make you survive those minutes where he's on the floor. So it's a combination of those things. Maybe it's not as catastrophic of a roster construction as we think it is. If you get some minutes from those rookie guys, one of them ends up being serviceable, and then Zion ends up being serviceable as, doing some like 15-minute, like they can get squeezed just enough center time from those guys to survive at least the regular season.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's got to be something there. There has to be some sort of method to the madness that it appears to be on paper. There has to have to
Yeah.
be some sort of plan there, or else the Pelicans really aren't doing their job in terms of the front office. I'll go for my first team, the Los Angeles Clippers,
What?
and I'll tell you why these
What?
are interesting.
I'm
Okay,
ready. Okay.
so because of one man, one name, James Harden. We're about to see something that we never really get the chance to see.
Okay.
We're going to see a guy who's went from being one of the most high usage guys in the entire NBA, who for the last 3-4 years has gone away from that because of the guys he's playing with, become more of a facilitator, less of a scorer. But now we're going to get to see him given the chance to go back to being that high production, high shooting volume type of player. And we're going to see, does he really still have it? And I find that very, very interesting.
Like the way you described the change to his game, just like makes me know what the next chapter is, Ronan. Like he went from a high volume shooter to then less efficient, so he leaned into his playmaking, and then he tried a little bit here and there, and he was still inefficient in Philly. But okay, at least he can still play make. I don't think he's got it, man. I think we're gonna continue to see him go down, but I think they're interesting from the fact that they are a dying star. Somehow Paul George, made his way out of that black hole. Kawhi Leonard, this is the funny thing is talk all day about, Kawhi is not healthy enough. He's not playing enough. Dude played 62 games last season. So, okay, maybe there's a little bit too much being made of the time missed, even though it's still 18 games. That's still 20 games rather. So do I really want to see Harden take more shots? Sure. Do I think he still has it? I don't. I mean, the free throw rate's gone down. His field goal percentage at the rim's gone down. His rim rate's gone down. His ability to get in the paint, like you can just see it. He just can't really elevate the way he used to. He can't really explode the way he used to. But I mean, if we get to see him take 8 step back threes a game, then maybe we're working with something. If we get MVP Harden back, Kawhi Leonard plays 72 games, and maybe we're talking about something interesting. But this is This is a dying star, and this is going to be a brutal season, I think, for the Clippers.
I agree. That's the most likely outcome, but they have no choice but to lean on Harden. They pay like giving them that 2 year, $70 million extension. Like no one else was going to match that money, but they knew they had no choice but to keep him because of what they had already given up for him and what they knew they were losing in Paul George. But like you look down at like the breakdown, like his last year in Houston, 1920, his last full year with Houston, he was at 22.3 field goal attempts, 12.4 threes, 11.8 free throw attempts. He averaged 34 and 7.5 assists. Then in his time with the Nets, he averaged 16.3 shots per game, 7.6 free throw attempts. 76ers drops again, 14 shots a game, 7.5 free throw attempts a game. Last year with the Clippers, 11.4 field goal attempts, 6.8 threes, and just 4.8 free throws a game. 16.6 points, 8.5 assists. They just lost 26 and a half shots per game in Paul George and Russell
Yeah,
Westbrook.
yeah.
I think there's a very legitimate case to make that 7 of those shots go to James Harden. Chris Dunn's not taking a load of shots. Derek Jones Jr. is not taking a load of shots. Mo Bamba's not taking a load of shots. Neither is Nick Batum. Like, Harden is going to be put in the position that he's going to need to take, especially the games that Kawhi Leonard is not there. He's going to be taking 20 shots a game. And even when Kawhi is there, the two of them, like, it wouldn't be shocking if the two of them combined for 20 attempts a game because they just don't have the scores and shooting outside of that. You got Norm Powell, but for the most part, I don't think Norm Powell and Harden will see the floor together much other than maybe in closing lineups.
You know, you're talking me into it a little bit because Harden. The one thing that I'll say about Harden is that for all the flack he gets, like he's adapted to the places he's been. Like his role in Brooklyn was to be a facilitator primarily. They had the offensive weapons, the scores, the on ball scores, and Harden's greatest skill out of all of them was to make the offense run. And same thing in Philly. And you had a young guy in Maxey who needed a point guard to kind of help him along, and Harden did that. I don't think Harden got enough credit for sacrificing in that way. And I think part of his struggles you do have to attribute to, losing a lot of your on ball responsibility, like changing your mindset from like I'm gonna take a shot no matter what. And if someone's open, fine, let's do that. But like he was really the only, he's the only option in Houston. So if we see that would be a first in a long time. Because I think everyone's assumed that Harden has fallen off, and I think for good reason. We've seen that, but his perimeter game is still there, and his perimeter game is what made him an MVP. And if he's gonna be able to take 20 shots a game, I mean, he is gonna put up numbers. And the efficiency of it, that's questionable, but there's something to be said for a guy like him to be able to take that many shots and just have the freedom to do so. That would maybe make things a lot easier for him mentally, just to like get back in that zone. I don't. It's not impossible. I mean, you're not preaching impossibilities here. Like I think that definitely could happen. And what did the Clippers look like if Kawhi does play 70 games and Harden is like still like a 28, 30 point per game scorer? Now that you're just handed him half the shots because nobody else on the team's vying for it. It's just Kawhi and Harden. Like no one else you really have to feed. And Powell, he can run free off the bench. So sure, maybe things got a little bit more simple.
Yeah, I mean, like it's just the situation. Like he's going to be put in the position to deliver the numbers that he used to. Whether he can do it or not, we'll see. I mean, we're going to see the whole thing about I'm the system. We're going to see that come back around next
Eh,
year. It's either going to be in a positive light, as in Clippers fans saying, "Yeah, maybe this guy really is system," or it's going to be in the negative light where, yeah, he's the system, but oh wait, he just sucks at it. So like we're going to see that come back, whether it's going to be in a positive or negative sense. It's just interesting that he is now like without doubt the second option. There's no one even close to him as the second option, and with the health of Kawhi Leonard, he could be very consistently the number one option by a mile too. So it's just very going to be very interesting to see him be put back into position to take all so many shots and see if he still has that ability to put up those points.
yeah. I like one interesting thing for them. They have a couple fun, I like the random players, right? I did not know they had Kai Jones. I was a big Kai Jones fan out of Charlotte. Um, Dude, I think just had some issues, fitting into that locker room and like just mentally with himself. And I've seen interviews on it, like it seems like he's done a lot of personal work. But he is a guy that I thought had like crazy athletic potential as a rim running big. And he's gonna have a lot of fun next if he gets some run next to James Harden, like forget I don't know how Mo Bamba keeps getting contracts, by the way. Like why is he still in the NBA? He literally does nothing. Nothing. Like I hope he does not get minutes. If we can get some minutes for Kai Jones, if we can also see Kevin Porter Jr., maybe he makes a comeback. So maybe there's a couple storylines on the Clippers besides Harden and if he sinks or swims. Um, but Kai Jones, Kevin Porter, maybe that's their bench mob. James Harden, I don't know if I can get behind it fully, but I do see the vision.
No,
I do see the
it's not about
vision.
getting behind it. It's just the fact that it is happening. Stop. You don't have. I'm not making you say it's going to work or it's not, but it's happening. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's gonna be sink or swim. I think it's boom or bust. If they lean into this James Harden experience and he delivers, this is gonna be one of the greatest, you know, comebacks of an MVP in a while. It'll be similar to the, Russell Westbrook experience where it's like, is he still that MVP level player? Can he still deliver at that level? And I think we've pretty much close to answered it for Harden. Like we know that he's that, still an elite facilitator. He's still an elite offensive player, but he can't take that many shots. If he shuts everybody up, that would be very impressive. I don't think anyone is expecting that at all from him.
No, no. I think I agree. I'm definitely in the camp that it's not going to work, but I am definitely intrigued to see how it goes down.
Yeah. All right, I'm not laughing anymore. That's fair. He changed my mind a little bit on it. I thought that was kind of a laughable answer, but I see the vision. Maybe I'll turn on a couple quarters of LA Clippers next season. Let's see. We're gonna stay in the Western Conference. This one makes a little bit more sense, in my opinion. Um, Memphis Grizzlies. Nobody's
Yes.
talking about it, really. Maybe it's
Mm.
because of foregone conclusion. It's foregone conclusion that they're gonna come back and be exactly who they were. But unfortunate news on them. They lose GG Jackson. Not sure how long he's going to be out with the foot injury. He's a guy that was huge X factor. I think he's shown that he's going to be a starting level wing for them. And that was such a great discovery that they had in this lost season. But not a lot of teams are going to go from being on the bottom all the way back into contention. And they're in that spot. And they're going to be hungry. And I think Memphis is one of the most fun teams to watch when they had their thing going. When Ja was out and they're still an amazing team and he comes back and they're still contending. And I love to keep thinking back to how they're really just shots away from beating the Warriors and being, you know, right there. They could have been in the finals just a few years ago. And we forget about that. And this is that same core group. And what makes this all so much more interesting too is that this is gonna again be on the backs of a rookie. Zach Edey really
Mm.
is the key to this like working out and to see how a rookie deals with that. And a star rookie at that, like this guy, like in college, like was a bona fide college star. Like everyone in the country who knows anything about college basketball, or even not even college basketball, anyone who watches any basketball at all adjacently, like knows who Zach Edey is, knows his resume. And this guy, I think I still have such high hopes that he's just going to come in and answer all the questions. And he's going to do exactly what you need him to do, which is be, I mean, essentially Steven Adams. If you have Steven Adams on the team, that's the guy that did so much. That's why they're winning rebounding battles. That's why defensively, like no one's getting second shots because you got your Steven Adams out there. Zach Edey can do that. And the way that Ja's getting open lanes, like the crushing screens you get from Adams, I think Zach Edey's going to do that. And for that to come on the back of a rookie, and for them to make this comeback the way that I think they can, not to mention like Desmond Bain too, coming off of a really impressive season where we weren't sure if Bain was going to kind of shy away from this moment because without Ja, like you didn't know if Bane was gonna get better or maybe too much defensive attention is gonna be tough for him. But he got the toughest defenders. He got double teams. Like he was really it offensively on the perimeter at times. And he peaked. He scored almost 24 points per game. And his efficiency took a little bit of a dip, but I mean he's truly like proven like he can be a second option on a championship team.
Yeah, Bane is an incredibly talented player, but yeah, like you already mentioned, like Edie is that big one. Like Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr. are going to be very important to just trying to help kind of cover up a few things defensively where he's got that bit of weakness. But like you said, like he can come in, and if he's comes in and he's playing 20-25 minutes a night, and he's that instant impact player, strong screener, great rebounder, good rim protector, like they get that from him right off the bat. Then you're like, okay, that's step one to them getting back to being top four, top five seed in the Western Conference. Then you just say health is on their side. Ja Morant is able to stay on the floor this year. Hopefully, only injuries and nothing in the personal life keep him out of the game. But will injury luck be on their side this year? And if that's the case, and Edie's having that impact, then it's hard to really say they won't be back in the top four, top five contention in the West.
Yeah, and they're gonna go from being a lottery team to contending for a championship. That's the kind of turnaround. So you're gonna be wanting to turn on the Grizzlies every night because they're gonna be hungry every night. There's a lot of teams, they have to maintain their spot. They gotta really, tinker around with their rosters, figure out who's gotta be where. Like the Grizzlies every night are gonna be coming with a vengeance. John Morant's gonna be coming with a vengeance. This is a guy who's an MVP level candidate. Like this is a guy who can win an MVP, and he's coming back, and he's gonna have like everything to prove, absolutely everything to prove. And I can't imagine another team that's gonna be playing harder every night at the top of their conference. There's gonna be no rest days, man. They're like this team is really gonna be pushing for it, and if ED stays healthy, I think they're gonna be right there.
Yeah, I feel like Edie could be the difference between whether they kind of end up closer to the play-in or whether they kind of end up closer to like a four or five seed or possibly even higher. I think his impact as a rookie is going to be very important. That like they're going to be back in like the play-in playoff race. They're going to be somewhere around that mark for the whole season. But I think his impact and his health for the year will kind of decide whether they're kind of closer to the 6 or 7 seed or closer to the 3-4 seed.
Yeah, yeah. And there's not a lot of rookies that you know that the fate of their team kind of relies on it without being like that number one option. Like he is the elite glue that's going to hold their championship hopes together. But yeah, I'm
Older
excited to
player,
get
more
back on that.
experienced player. So that should
Yeah,
hopefully help his side of it as well.
yeah. Who you got?
Well, we'll stay boring. This is probably going to be a quick one. We'll stay out. My last team from the Western Conference. Got to quickly talk about the Lakers because they are very intriguing. Because we have to see how good is JJ Redick,
Yeah.
how impactful. Because he's a first-time head coach, because he's really a first-time coach at any sort of major level. What are the impact of his mistakes going to be? He's going to make mistakes. How big of an impact are they going to have in this team? Then you look at the individuals on the team. You're like, Austin Reeves. He take another leap. He put up 4 more shots per game, 2 more threes last season. Can he do something similar this year? Where it go from 16 points, 5.5 assists to maybe 20 points, 6.5 assists this year? Is that potential there for him? AD, apparently he's going to be the hub of the offense. How is that going to work with him being the offensive hub, an offensive takeover from AD? LeBron James, can he afford to just be more of a facilitator like we saw with Team USA? Is there going to be room for him to be able to afford to do that with his Lakers team, or is there still going to be so much pressure on him to get up shots and put the ball in the basket? And then the trades. Are they going to be able to pull off the Jeremy Grant, Robert Williams double move? If they can't do that, should Cam Johnson be the guy that they're targeting? There's just so much questions to answer for this Lakers team. And because they're the Lakers, that obviously makes them interesting regardless of what's going on. But the fact that all this is going on in LA, Bronny James as well, like they're a very intriguing prospect ahead of this year.
Did you see the bet that's out there for Bronny James to score more than 25 points in a game?
I didn't know.
The odds are insane, and I just needed to throw this out there. I think if you bet $83, you'd win, and he scored over 25 points in any regular season game, you'd win like 100K or something crazy like that. Are you taking that bet?
I mean, if I knew he was going to play like full minutes for the last like 3 games of the season against teams that were had already given up, maybe I'd consider it. But
Is
I don't
JJ
know.
Redick gonna play? That I guess that's a question, and I'm curious. That's a storyline that I'm curious to see. As I'm done with like all the Bronny James stuff, but it is gonna be interesting to see like, hey, there's gonna be arguments for it. Hey, D'Lo has had a crappy week this week. He's shooting 20% from like you're gonna get weeks like that where he's just not going. Do we see what Bronny's got? We already know what we saw from him in summer league. Is he gonna get some run? And then there's gonna be that controversy, and it's gonna be really hard on a guy who's also like LeBron James' friend, his coach. Like it's it's gonna be a really intriguing experience to see because you don't see very often where colleagues become, coach player kind of situation, especially to the caliber that LeBron James is and the caliber that, for himself, JJ Redick is being well known in the NBA community, being well known to all the players and to the media. Like this is such an LA situation. It's hilarious. I mean, I think that I believe in Reddick. I believe in, how he analyzes different teams. You see how he thinks, you see how he sees the game, and he's such a savant. Like when he talks about basketball, it reminds me a lot of how we see Tony Romo talk about football when you're seeing him break down tape, when you see him break down like the different things that should have happened and the type
Mhm.
of plays that can expose defenses. And you can see that he really, I mean, we don't get to look into the mind of some of these other coaches that we've had the privilege of seeing with Reddick, but I've no doubt he's going to get the best that he can out of some of these guys. Um, for them, I'm also curious. This is kind of an outside thing, but a couple players that you did mention, Gabe Vincent, like just could not catch a break last year with
Yeah.
with health. I still believe he's great. Like we saw how good of a player he is in Miami. That wasn't a fluke. I think he truly is that level of a two-way player, that level of a point guard. And is Dalton Connect as good as everyone's making him out to be? A
That'd be
lot of
great.
hype around him.
That'd be great.
A lot of hype around him. He answers some important questions on the offensive end if he can be a slashing three-point shooter, like a guy that can be a little more consistent than Rui. But that's a lot to ask of a rookie, especially in this situation. So that would be a huge turnaround, and a lot of people are going to be watching him and watching how JJ gets him involved. But all things considered, that they're again in such a tough spot. Like you said, those trades that we don't even know if they're going to happen and what it'll take to mortgage the future, you know, not just the future that you can't really conceptualize because it's past LeBron. I I think to some degree you would like to imagine that the Lakers want to create a new identity past LeBron, and part of that has to do with JJ Redick. Are you going to really strip JJ Redick of the opportunity in the not too distant future to have a player to draft and develop?
Yeah.
'Cause
That's why it's so
that's what
tough.
you're
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just this fake imaginary pick in the future. That's a few years down the line. That's when JJ Redick's been a coach for a few years, and if you really believe in him as a coach and what kind of culture he's gonna bring in, because right now the culture is LeBron. That's who knows if it's this year, next year, that's not gonna be there. So if JJ is your building block along with Anthony Davis, like,
And
you
Bronny
can't give
James.
that up either. Stop. The water boy. But no, I'm interested to see how that goes, and I think that it would be great to see things get better because you want to get another run out of LeBron. You want to see that. I it's
I think Vando's got to play a big role as well in terms of defensively. But as long as it's always a problem with him is he can be such a liability offensively that it's tough to play him in big minutes. But he does have a big impact on this team in the minutes that he does play. And hopefully JJ can figure out ways to kind of make him more impactful, get him more like just see him as a cutter in terms of offense and maybe the odd dunk things like that, and then he can be that impactful defensive player if he's a guy you'll see in closing lineups for the Lakers because he does offer that bit of defense that they pretty much don't have outside of Anthony Davis.
yeah, he's an ace that I think they'll put in situationally. And if he can be healthy this season, that would be great too. They need a little more luck. I can't believe
Yeah.
I'm hoping that for the Lakers, but at this point, I feel bad.
Yeah, and then again, and then obviously, yeah, still have to talk about the fact that can AD and LeBron be as healthy as they were last year? Because that was shocking to everyone. They can do that again. Like, hopefully they can. Because that'd be great. Even just AD, even LeBron only plays 65 games next year without any major injuries. Maybe they just rest him a little bit more, and AD still able to play 70 plus games. Like that'd be huge.
Yeah. Um, should we move out east?
Yeah,
Got a
let's
couple
head out
interesting
to
ones in
let's
the
head out to the
east.
east.
Uh, hot take time. Let's go with the Raptors. They have the sixth
Ooh,
worst
ooh.
record. And they're a team that before, they had their OG Ananobis, they had their Pascal Siakams, they had this rising Scotty Barnes, Fred Van Vliet, and every year it was like, okay, like they have all this talent, they have such good defensive pieces. If they can just kind of figure out their roles and everything fall into place, then they're gonna be really great. Raptors are coming, they're coming, they're coming. And they just never made it there. There's never enough spacing. The team didn't really make sense. The roster wasn't what it was supposed to be, and there's too much overlap. And last season was hard. It was bad. That's why they had the sixth worst record. They had in-season trades, and Darko was a first-time head coach, and he had to deal with that. But just starting with coaching as a first-time head coach, I mean, he still did pretty decently. In the last 10 games, they went from a bottom 10 offense to a top 5 offense. Yes, small sample size. But if you just look at some of the stretches where he actually had health on his team, they were good offensively. They had good ball movement. They had good actions to get their shooters open. And once they made those trades to get IQ in, to get RJ Barrett in, and they started to give a little bit more run to Grady Dick, things started to look more functional. And I think the reason I bring up the coaching is because the the hope for this team obviously isn't the coach, but the hope for this team has always been get a system that makes sense around Scotty Barnes. Because this is a guy who, I mean, he's a question mark because you're not sure what kind of player he is. You know he's a fantastic player. You know he's an all-star level player. But the question is, and the reason why they had some pause with, even entertaining Durant trades just a couple years ago, is he like an all NBA player? Is he like a top 10, top 12 level player? I mean, last year he averaged 20 points, 8.2 rebounds, 6.1 assists. He's getting stocks. He's a guy who could defend pretty much all 5 positions. Like, he is a multi-tool that's also a fantastic passer, sees the game. I think that this could be a season where not only are the Raptors gonna improve for multitude of reasons, but Scotty Barnes is a guy that, like we talked about with Zion, going from just like a star level player to superstar, he has that potential. Look across the league at young guys who haven't made that leap into stardom yet, and I think Scotty is in position to do that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree. I really like Scotty Barnes' game. I like how this team now is built around him. Obviously, the impact of Manuel quickly and RJ Barrett, the impact they had in Toronto, especially RJ Barrett. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it's just kind of a thing of the lights are a little bit less bright in Toronto. He's kind of able to relax a bit more. There's not as much pressure on him than we saw it in New York, and that's working for him. And we saw it again in the Olympics. He was good, he was really good in the Olympics too. So that's a great sign for this Raptors team. I'm with you on Scotty Barnes. I think he could really have this breakout year. This would be the year for him where he really establishes himself as one of the top rising young players in the NBA. And like I said this before when we were doing the predictions for win loss, I think the Raptors can be right up there in that battle for the 9 or 10 playing spot for most of the season. Whether they get there or not, guess that depends on how good maybe the likes of the Hawks or the Heat are. I guess this year, but I think they'll be in that battle at least up until kind of January, February. Maybe they'll drop off then, but I think they'll definitely be in the conversation for the first part of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I I won't even limit it at that because when I really think about Scotty Barnes' potential, like how good they could be if he, like we're talking about with Zion, if things get simplified by your best player realizing his potential. Um, I don't think their ceiling for this season is even a 9 or 10. If all things go correctly, I think that they could be arguing for a top 6. And this is because it's not just Scotty. If Scotty is that good, if Scotty is like a 25, 8, and 7 type of player, if he's that good, and I think he is. I think it's just a matter of time for Scotty in terms of like maturity, in terms of how he's treating his body, just like all the kind of young player stuff that once they figure that stuff out and they consistently do it night in night out, that's when they make that leap. And I think he's right there. It's not just him. IQ, yes, he's a major X factor, but RJ Barrett, like just to talk numbers on him in those 32 games, he went from being, what he was in New York to scoring 22 points per game, career high. Efficiently, 55.3% from the field, 60% in the arc. What we've been asking from him is making those cuts, being a slash, getting in the paint, scoring efficiently there. He did that. And he shot 39% from three in those 32 games. And he did that comfortably. Like you said, I think it probably has to do with just being embraced by his community out there. Going beyond him, Grady Dick, this is no exaggeration. He could become the next like best movement shooter in the NBA. On 3-point shots, a movement threes, he shot 45%. And when you see the kind of shots that Darko is setting up for him, and at 6'7", he's just tough to guard, man. Like he's very long, he's very tall, and he has no problem, moving around the perimeter. He's not a guy that's just gonna like hang out on the corners. He's not just gonna be waiting for a pass. Like he's gonna be moving. And that kind of guy, not only, is just stretching out the floor, he's a guy that requires a wing to defend him. And that pulls guys out, and that's something that starts to bend defenses. And then you start to talk about the spacing that is being created, not just by him, but by Scotty and how he plays in the paint. And then you got RJ shooting better. IQ is clearly, I think IQ clearly is such an upgrade over what they've had. Like, just nobody. So defensively, you believe in this group. Offensively, things are starting to come together. I don't think there's any reason to think that the ceiling, we're talking ceilings here, right? Best case scenario, intrigue. That's why there's intrigue, is because Scotty could be a like bona fide like all NBA player. These guys, there are at least 3 X factors that I think can make another jump. And Darko, I think, showed enough that he's a good coach that's going to be able to make this all happen. So I mean, they threw a pizza party last year when they got a 3-game win streak, which I thought was the funniest thing. Like just picturing like millionaires, and you think that they're gonna celebrate with like going to like a 5-star like restaurant, so they're doing a pizza party. I think you're gonna be having a lot of pizza parties this season with some of the players making the jumps that I think they'll make.
I'm loving everything you're saying, and I'm believing in this Raptors team. But I will say right now, I'll give you $100 if the Toronto Raptors are a top 6
Yo,
seed.
clock it.
Yeah,
Clock it.
I'll give
Set
you
on some
$100 if they're a top 6 seed this year.
Who else we got in the East?
I go with an obvious one. The
Okay.
76ers.
Yes. Obvious, yes.
Potential to have an elite big three. Like it feel like on paper it works so well. PG is healthy and Embiid is healthy. We still see growth from Tyrese Maxey. Like the flow feels perfect. I mean, sometimes we don't see with some of the other big threes that we've seen. Just look at the Phoenix Suns. The flow seems right here. There's a space for all of them within the starting lineup. But you also, PG has had his health issues. He's getting older. Embiid, of course, always a health issue. Maxi, will he be harmed at all by having to defer to Paul George a little bit? We'll have to wait and see. I think there should be no problems. I rely on Nick Nurse to figure this out because I think he's such a talented coach. Then you're like, okay, do they have to add a legitimate number 4? Yabusele, I mean, in the Olympics, wow,
Yahoo!
the impact he had with that French team, he looked great, but he was really, really bad in the NBA before. Has enough really changed that he can come in and be that impactful player. They've got great depth. It's just a question of that 4 spot, because being realistic, I don't think we're going to see any sort of consistent minutes that actually work with both Embiid and Drummond on the floor. So that 4 spot still feels like a weak spot for them. But what they've done to kind of build this team up, and the fact that they're still in a flexible position where they could potentially still add that number 4 if a guy that's got a rebounder, got size, becomes available.
All right, let's talk Yabu, because that's PJ Tucker, such a massive impact player, both on the Bucks and his time in Philly. You know what? Obviously, a lot of it was kind of theoretical in Philly because his shot started to fall off, and then he became a liability. But that level of guard everyone player, rebound everything player, like just the energy he brings. That's what you kind of expect from Yabu. And it's funny because they have a very similar career arc where things didn't work out in the NBA, have to go abroad, hone your skills, make a name, except for dunking on LeBron. I mean, Yabu dunked on LeBron. It was like, yeah, come on back. We'll buy your ticket now. Like he quietly has changed everything that was a problem for him. I mean, he couldn't shoot. I mean, you couldn't do anything with him on the floor because he didn't really have the on-ball skill to do it. He's wasn't really that roller that you need him to be. So it was kind of a question mark, like, all right, what do we do with him? But now he's developed more skills in the EuroLeague, and the most important skill that you need from him right now is shooting to go along with that defense, and he does that. I mean, just I'll list off every sample size we have since 2021, 2022. 39%, 43%, 42%, 43%, 48%, 39%. That is like 6, 7 separate segmented seasons where he's shot very well from three. And that's on high volume, like 109 shots, 110 shots, 70 shots, 80 shots, 71 shots. Like, this is not like he's taking 30 shots and making a handful of them. Like, he's been making those shots. And you've seen it too. Like, his shot looks a lot better. And what does that do? Like, I know we're talking about Gershon Yabusele right now, but number one, it's September. Let me talk about Gershon Yabusele. And number two, like they need that glue guy, and they have more of them. You don't have to just rely on Maxi, George, and Embiid to do absolutely everything. You have guys like Kelly Oubre, you have guys like Caleb Martin,
Yeah.
and Yabusele has a place in that. He absolutely has a place in that. You got Eric Gordon. Heck, you got a rookie in Jared McCain who I think, you could throw him some minutes, and I think he can do some stuff with the ball.
I'm
Like
excited to see his
legit.
impact. Yeah, I'm excited to see
Yeah.
what he can bring to like a winning team as a rookie.
Yeah. They've impressively filled out this roster with guys who can really cook with minutes. Like they're Andre Drummond. If Embiid needs to take a week off, Drummond's gonna lead the league in rebounds.
Yeah.
Like and he's gonna have a 20 and 20 game this season. And even the rookie too, like what we saw from Adam Bona, what he did in summer league, he looks like an NBA center. Like they've really filled out this roster around the big three that I'm willing to call it because I think Maxi is still ascending. And if they need to take time, if there's going to be rest involved, which there should be and definitely will be, I don't care if Embiid plays 50 games. Seriously, I don't care if he adopts a Kawhi mindset because he's a guy that needs to be in the playoffs. We need to see a full playoff run from Embiid, but everybody else, I mean, they're ready to go. I mean, Caleb Martin's a guy that you're gonna expect him to do great things for this team as a role player. Kelly Oubre, can we talk about his evolution too? Like last season, like I mean, he's always just been this offensive minded, like garbage time player. Like he's just empty stats. And he embraced being a defender. Like he is a guy that's always had defensive potential. Now he's doing that. They have two legit two-way wings alongside Paul George. This is going to be a really good defensive team. Like if you look at this lineup, Embiid is on the back line, and then you have to go through three big wings: Oubre, Martin, Paul George. Like Maxi's got to really be a little bit comfortable here, looking alongside him. Like they look pretty big outside of Maxi.
Yeah, no, they got good size. Like I said, like their summer was great. The way they filled out this roster was really impressive, and they're gonna be a very interesting team. And like you mentioned, with Embiid adopting the Kawhi, like Nick Nurse was the coach when with that Kawhi situation in Toronto. I mean, we need to see Embiid healthy in the playoffs. He's the one to keep saying it. I know there's kind of harsher rules around it now, um, with being able to sit for certain games, and obviously you have to play a certain amount to be able to qualify for All NBA and things of that nature. And Embiid's already done all that. So how about you just do all you can to be healthy for the playoffs? That's all anyone in the world wants from you. All any NBA media people, all any NBA fans, they just want to actually see you be healthy in the playoffs so we can really judge whether you are really that good or just a regular season player. We gotta get a definitive answer to that, and hopefully we get that this year.
Yeah, not just regular season dominance. And that'll be an interesting thing just on the whole thing about the Eastern Conference, thing about 76ers and Embiid. Now the Celtics are obvious favorites again to be in the championship. And everyone's, creating these storylines of Jalen Brown's upset and Tatum's upset and they're gonna come back to the vendors and really prove themselves. Sure. But I mean, the 76ers have a whole lot more to prove. The Knicks have a whole lot more to prove. The Bucks have a lot to prove. Like, the top of the East is gonna be so hungry, and the 76ers getting this filled out, getting Paul George and getting, like, a really strong, deep roster, like, the top of the East continues to get better, and the way that just an absolute masterclass of an offseason, the way that they put this together, because 'cause they're just as deep as the Knicks, and they have just as much high level talent as the Bucks. And in terms of like challenging the Celtics, like they're up there. They're up there. And they should have the wing depth and the wing defense to kind of sustain an attack that they get from Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum. Like who else is going to be able to say that to that level of confidence? I think the 76ers are there.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally agree. Like, now we just it's all there on paper. Now we just got to go and actually see it occur on the court.
I have a question mark for the next one. Should we be intrigued with the Charlotte Hornets?
No, no, we should never ever be intrigued by the Charlotte Hornets.
I don't know. The reason I ask is because LaMelo Ball is an expectant star, right? We're expecting him to hit stardom. And obviously, he played 22 games 2 seasons ago, 36 games the season after that. And he was a super young all star in his second year. And we saw him in his final 10 games. I mean, he was like top five clutch scoring, top five clutch assists, 91st percentile, and offensive plus minus, career highs in points, shooting percentage, steals, and then he gets hurt again. So, I mean, obviously the question is he healthy? But if we're just talking about intrigue, are you intrigued with a season where you may get Brandon Miller in his second year as he's ascending? You get another year of Mark Williams, who looked like a really good center.
Yeah, I want to see some
Get
Mark
that?
Williams. Yeah, I
Yeah,
will
like
say
really good center.
I'll be intrigued if we get to see a healthy year from LaMelo and from Mark Williams, and then we also have the ascension of Brandon Miller. That makes Charlotte. That gives you a reason to go and watch the Hornets and see how they're doing.
Yeah, I think they could be when we talk about like the ceiling and stuff. I think they more so slot into that dangerous 9-10 team. I think Raptors can be much more dangerous than that if we're just talking like top of their ability. But I am intrigued to see if LaMelo Ball what he looks like for a full season. And also the opposite of it, if he's hurt again this season, that's that I think says something about who he is as an athlete. Because we have these guys that are uber talented, but they just can't stay healthy, and that kind of sets in stone like what we can expect from them. And a
Is it the
lot of these, and
shoes? Is it the shoes?
I
Daddy
mean,
says it's the shoes.
should have stayed with Big Baller.
Ah.
Should have stayed with Big Baller, maybe. But I mean, because they have all the pieces, I think, to make sense around him. They're not like this incomplete young team who doesn't have enough. They have their second guy. I think Brandon Miller is definitely that second guy. They have their Josh Green. I is one of my favorite role players in the NBA. Like you, this is well documented at this point. I love Josh Green, but you have that spark plug scorer, Miles Bridges. Mark Williams is an absolute like 100% bona fide starter, quality center in this league, and he's a guy alongside LaMelo Ball. You need a guy like that. Nick Richardson, like they have solid bench play. I like him as a bench player. Grant Williams,
Grant
great bench
Williams,
player.
yeah.
Trey Mann is a guy who I think like is trying to prove himself and could be a great spark plug off the bench too. Like they have guys who can really prove themselves. Micic was like weirdly one of the most exciting storylines from last season with how he's such an elite passer, and Seth Curry too making a return there. They have guys on this roster. They have enough depth to be a good team, and Lamelo Ball has enough talent there to make them a very good team if he's healthy. But I'm intrigued if to see like if they can put something together because this is not an incomplete roster. I think they have the guys on this roster to rock. They have Taj Gibson to show them the way. Like, like there's enough here. And if they can cook with it, then I think that they're rocking with a team that can challenge for playing.
Yeah, and
Should be challenging.
The Knicks will probably give them a first round pick for Taj Gibson later in the season, knowing how desperate they'll be to sign him. They'll just be like, okay, we'll just give up our pick to get Taj Gibson. But yeah, no, the health is just so vitally important for that Hornets team. Like one of those guys, one of the Marco Williams or LaMelo goes down. So obviously, especially LaMelo, either of them go down, and then you're back to just saying, okay, who cares about Charlotte? Yeah, it's cool that Brandon Miller is doing this, but I don't really care. I'm not gonna tune in to watch them. But yeah, if they're healthy, definitely intriguing. Definitely a team that can surprise and get into the sneak into the play-in. My next team, I got a team that obviously you already mentioned, the Milwaukee Bucks. What are we gonna see from them this year? Is the bounce back year pending? I feel like most people are either on the side of they're absolutely going to come back with a vengeance, or they're going to actually fall off that a little bit more. I feel like it's those sides of the coin. You're either on one side or the other. Then you're like, is Dame done? A lot of people tried to make that argument last year. Is he finished? Middleton's health. He's just after having double ankle surgery. That's such an L for the Bucks because he's so important to what they do. They are such a better team, especially offensively when he's on the floor. And then Giannis, he's been like Embiid the last couple of years in the playoffs. Dude can't stay healthy in the playoffs.
Yeah.
This is the Bucks are just so interesting. And then you're look at I think I like some of the role players that they've added, like DeLon Wright, Torian Prince, and then Gary Trent Jr. is so interesting. Does he rise to the occasion on both ends of
Oh
the
yeah.
floor, playing in a team that absolutely unequivocally are a team that are championship or bust? Does he rise up to that occasion? The Bucks are really interesting going into next year.
They're interesting for like the other guys. Like 'cause I know what Giannis is gonna bring. I'm confident that. Brooke, I'm concerned. I'm wondering if he's gonna still be the same guy.
Hmm.
But Torian Prince, upgrade. Definite upgrade. Gary Trent Jr., absolute upgrade. And guys that people aren't really talking, DeLon Wright, this guy who is a really good defender, can play like legit point guard. Like he can give you those like key minutes that they were missing last season. They're missing a guy who can set the table a little bit and be an off-ball shooter and play good defense. Like DeLon Wright is a good defender, and you're gonna get that from him. And I'm not concerned about Dame, man. Like I can't sit here and be concerned about Dame playing in a new city. Like, he had some life stuff going on. And he's still a player. He played 73 games. He was pretty healthy last year. Still giving you 24 points a game, still giving you 7 assists a game, still like being that all-star level player. I think for Chris too. I mean, he's gonna have a comeback. He didn't have a major surgery. It's like arthroscopic. He's gonna be healthy for the start of the season. That's already been put out there. So all the good juju. But this is a team that has a lot to prove. And they're intriguing because they have the numbers now. They have enough, I think, depth to make it work. Hopefully, Pat Connaughton. They need to stop playing Pat Connaughton. That's my thing. This is not even based in like stats alone, but just like there's too much Pat Connaughton. Just like dial that back a little bit. I think we're gonna be good. Give a little bit more run for Gary Trent Jr. and Torian Prince, and those kind of injections of shooting and athleticism on the perimeter alongside Giannis is gonna go such a long way. And Dame really needs to prove it. Like
Yeah, it's a prove a year for I guess Giannis and Dame as a duo. Like remember how high energy I don't think anyone
unguardable. We said
so
unguardable.
yeah,
The
like
word was
and we weren't
unguardable.
alone there. Like everyone in the NBA media was like falling head over heels, thought this was going to be the most unstoppable duo. Let's see if we get that this year. That's obviously an intriguing part. And the fact that teams around them have gotten better too, like the Knicks and like the 76ers, that also adds to the intrigue of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, a team that I think I don't think we've been so high on a offseason change that's has been so disappointing.
Hmm.
Like that the Dame Giannis, it felt like a ticket to the finals is what it felt like. And now we're in a prove it year, a year right after that. And I think they will. I think to a similar degree of the Grizzlies. I think a lot of these guys have a lot to prove. And I think Giannis is a guy who always stays hungry every season, and Dame too. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, you got last up.
I was, I was gonna go with it, and this is a small question. This is my intriguing question, and I didn't want to belabor this, but it's still on my mind, and we'll make this one quick. Going back out west with the Houston Rockets,
Hmm. They are such an
I
intrigue.
will be watching them to see what their direction is.
Hmm.
And I'll give you a couple numbers. A lineup with Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Jalen Smith, and Amen Thompson at the end of the season. That fast, quick twitch team played a lot more in the open, could switch a lot more. Amen Thompson playing the five, just some funky, fun basketball. They had an offensive rating of 122.3. Surprisingly, defensive rating was still not where you want it to be, 117.5, but they had a net rating of 4.8. Positive direction. And then you look at a lineup of Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Brooks Smith, and Şengün, net rating of 0.4. And I just bring up those numbers to kind of like conflate whether or not we believe in Amen Thompson as a guy that's worth rocking with for what the Rockets want to do. Who are the Rockets? And that is a question. That's the most intriguing part about this team compared to any other team in the league, I think, is that they have so many directions to go. Because Şengün has shown you he can be a system in himself. Like, you can play this guy who has such an old school style of, below the rim basketball, but be elite still in this day and age. And you can create offense through him. You can run things through him. But then when you inject a completely different player, Amen Thompson, a guy who should be a point guard but somehow is playing center for you, you get something completely different. But you're still productive. So it's interesting to see like what kind of choices they're going to make here. And not just that, like Tari Eason, a guy who was a little bit injured last season, but they're really high on him or Jalen Smith. Like, is Jalen Smith going to prove it this
Jabari
year?
Smith. Huh.
Jabari Smith. There's too many Jalen's. There's Jabari Smith. Yeah, I'm wondering about Jalen. That's actually my next question. Is Jalen Smith going to prove it on the Bulls? But Jabari Smith, is he going to finally live up to that? Like, some people made some Kevin Durant comparisons in terms of not like how good he'll be, but in terms of being like that long off ball shooter that you just can't block his shot that really starts to break down defenses. Does he ever start to make strides in that direction? Is this going to be the year where he does that? Like, there's a lot of guys who could pop, a lot of guys who are going to have to sacrifice. And this is either going to implode or they're going to take more interesting directions. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. There's too many ingredients.
Yeah, they're like yeah, like we said, like they have literally like every young player in the world. Like it's cause like we meant talked about before. It's so hard to actually get paid by the Houston Rockets because there is just so much young talent there. Also intriguing, will they look to trade one of Jalen Green or Şengün? I think it's looking very likely that the two of them are not going to be on the team together long term. So could one of them be on the trade block? I know like the talk is that they're eyeing up Kevin Durant or whatever like that. I don't like that move. It doesn't really fit their timeline. But that's going to be an interesting area to watch. And does it come straight back in? Do they go straight back to what we saw last year with Şengün kind of being the hub of the offense? He kind of being the center of the team. Does Amen Thompson maybe get more minutes instead of Jalen Green? Is that the guy that maybe he feels the spot for? There's just so much that could still happen with the Houston Rockets. There's still so much talent. There's still so much guys that could potentially come in and play big minutes. I'm such a believer in Ime Udoka, so I think he'll figure it out. But yeah, in terms of just intrigue without having real idea of what way they're going to go, the Houston Rockets are right up there.
Yeah. And like I said, too many ingredients, and you have good ingredients. You didn't even mention Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore,
Yeah, Reed Shepherd.
like
Yeah.
guys who like I think have a lot of potential to do something. And what do you do with them? You can't just cook with all these ingredients. You got to simplify the recipe a little bit. And when they decide that is going to be the interesting part, because if they have a Jalen Green who's ascending and Alpi's kind of out of the mix, who's going to come in at the trade deadline and make a big offer?
Yeah.
And I know Kevin Durant doesn't fit the timeline, but you also have to ask yourself, like, they signed Fred VanVleet, they signed Dylan Brooks, they have, a team that they believe in. They have Ime Udoka, who's a guy who has championship aspirations. I mean, everyone does. So if things are imploding in Phoenix and you could make a trade that can make their team make more sense and consolidate your assets, who's to say that doesn't happen? Do you really say to yourself, well, he doesn't fit our timeline? Like, no, these guys are ready to compete. And especially if someone has really announced themselves as the core guy moving forward, then you do it. If it's December and Alpi's just out there even putting up bigger numbers, maybe you just do it.
Yeah.
Jalen Green's doing that, you just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like the possibilities are definitely they're definitely endless in Houston. That's one thing for sure. My final team. I wasn't going to mention the Knicks, but we talked a lot about them. We all know the intrigue with the Knicks,
You-
so I'm going to look at the Miami Heat. Do they
Why?
fall? Does Jimmy surprise us all?
This is your bi-monthly will the Heat be done question.
Yeah,
And by
like
bi-monthly,
does
they'll
Jimmy
be
really come out and have this big year that everyone's kind of saying he has to have or he's going to have? I think like that's the narrative at the moment. You're either saying he needs to do it or he's going to do it, and I'm just not so sure if Jimmy still has it in him to have that big year.
here's the fun part about the Miami Heat. They actually have young guys besides Jimmy Butler who I believe in. Jaime Jaquez, I think, has more room to grow. Nikola Jovic showed me plenty of flashes that I'm like, I want to see him, get more touches. Does Bam Adebayo want to shoot more threes? Is that a real thing? And then Khalil Ware, that is a rookie that I am most intrigued to watch this season because he's got that modern NBA game and he's got that shooting that, paired next to Bam. Could they run a double big lineup? Yeah, we haven't seen the Heat do that in
I
a
think
long
they'd love
time.
to. They'd love to be able to do it. Yeah.
Now, just imagining what kind of hell Spoelstra likes to put on other teams.
Mhm.
Can you just imagine having Bam and Khalil Ware on the floor at the same time, two rim protectors, and Bam, who you know he can switch on to everybody. I mean, there's a lot of fun things that they can still do with their roster. You still got another year of Terry Rozier to kind of prove what he's done. He did a lot of damage as a Hornet
How
on ball.
scary is Terry going to be? That's the question.
Yeah, I think he had kind of an off season last year. We've seen him be a great pick and roll operator. We've seen him be a great shooter, and it just didn't happen in Miami. And there's no reason to think that he can't make a comeback. So there's too many X factors that I think could be positive for them. They're big believers in Haywood Highsmith and developing his shot and what he does at his size. There's there's not enough bad things happening for Miami for me to believe they're just going to go away. And it has less to do about Jimmy Butler and everything to do about how they develop these other guys and how they've consistently just done it. You know, I can't I can't just all of a sudden believe that they're just gonna go away. I can't.
Okay, let me ask you this, Anna. Are they more likely to finish in the top six or in the play-in?
More that's that's a tough question. I mean, probably
Just-
probably the plan. Probably the plan. Um, yeah, that's fair. I mean, when we saw them in the championship, what seed were they? So it
yeah,
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I think
I
that
think
they
it's
have
it's beginning to matter more. I think yes.
it's beginning to matter more. I mean, if we see a precipitous drop from Jimmy Butler, for sure. For sure. Is Jovic and Jaime Jaquez going to replace that level of player if Butler, really falls off a cliff this season? No, he's not. But if Jimmy Butler is still who he is and you continue to develop these guys around him, are they going to be a dangerous team that you don't want to play that somehow we're looking up and they're in the Eastern Conference Finals? Oh yeah. I'm never doubting that, man. I'm never doubting that. Especially you give Spoelstra some of these players like a Khalil Ware, you don't know where he's going to go with that.
You will believe in the Heat until the day you die, and I will question the Heat until the day I die.
It's
Any,
it's just a PTSD, man. PTSD.
any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think of all these teams, just thinking about like who I really want to watch the most. I mean, I can't believe you convinced me to watch the Clippers. I'm gonna have to dig up my Harden jersey and what my closing thoughts is. I can't believe I took that back, but you've got me believing in the Clippers the slightest amount, and that's you need a medal for that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's hope. Let's see if I'm wrong or right. Then moving forward, we'll see. But that's going to wrap up today's episode. Again, we are in the depths of the off season. We're just trying to have a little bit of fun here. Still a while to go. We still got a few weeks even before training camp starts, but we're getting closer to the start of the NBA season. We're going to keep having fun here on Coast to Coast with some interesting, exciting topics that we're going to be discussing. But for now, Chris, thank you for joining me. Thank you all so much for listening. Remember, we are everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.